Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Dan from Headwaters, and behind me I've got the Crescent Lite Tackle II, and today we're going to give you our long-awaited overview and review of the new boat. The first Lite Tackle was a crowd pleaser. It's a boat that I love, that I use. I recommend it to a ton of you guys because I felt like for the value and for what you were getting in performance, it just had a lot going for it. So when they told me they were redoing the Crescent Lite Tackle, there was a few things I was really hoping that they would do, and we're gonna go over them today because they basically did all the things I would have hoped for. Let's just start off at the bow because they updated the hatch and they did some really neat stuff. One of my complaints, if you watch my old Lite Tackle review, was the hatch was not the most watertight. So they redid the hatch, rotomolded it, so it's a little heavier duty. They put a much larger seal on it, and then they changed the way it attaches. You have two different bungees that are pressing that hatch down. And then instead of it just being a cross bungee, they actually do like a webbing hinge in the front. So the whole thing just feels a lot more secure and it's not popping up and down. So nice upgrade there. They also give you this little strap here, so if you wanted to stick your rods on the boat for transportation, you can do that. You can just strap them in there. This also doubles as a paddle park. It has a little bit of a bungee and a little bit of flex, so it's really easy to get the paddle in and out of there. You could tell that the guys at Crescent actually went fishing on this thing and used it and tried it because it just works so perfectly. Other things that are different on the Lite Tackle II is they give you a high-low chair. They're still using the same chair that's hand sewn down in the southeast. It's got a nice padded, it's like an inch thick padding, so it's not just mesh webbing, it's actually padded inside there. And now you have a high-low position, which before you'd have to buy an accessory kind of plastic thing that mounted in. It worked okay, but this is a much cleaner setup. It gives you two cup holders on either side that are deep and actually have little bungees, so they will hold you in there. It's not just like, sometimes they just give you like a little round circle. These ones are actually very functional. Little mesh cargo pockets here on the side. Same real open standing platform. Same with the scuppers that run down the center of the boat. Also has a Yak Attack tracks on either side. Plenty of length so you can mount whatever you want to. It gives you a metal track here in the center. And this little track is set up where you can run a camera mount, an X-grip, or your fish finder. And then they use the scupper here. They utilize that for your scupper transducer if you wanted to run a fish finder. I also like how they added these nice little doohickeys here. Just spots where you want to throw, you know, your Senkos, your worms, your tackle, whatever you're using throughout the day. It can fit right in there. And then those things still drain out towards the scupper. Behind the seat, you got a couple of Yak Attack Mighty mounts, so you can install whatever you want. And they did a lot in the tank oil. It's very cool. The first thing is the old one went all the way to the back. And what I noticed when I was running rapids, like out here on the Sacramento River, is that waves would come over and the back would get real low in the water. So they added a bunch of volume and they added a hatch. So now we have access to the interior, and all this space that normally would fill up with water in the tank well is now positive buoyancy, which will help the kayak paddle nicer. It also gives you the ability to reach your hand in there if you're wanting to run lines or back up an anchor trolley. You have access to the inside of the boat. Other cool thing about the tank well is you have tracks on either side, and they give you these little screw-on adjustments. So if you want your bungee to be further back, you can adjust it back here. You can add more stuff along the tracks here. And then this is also cool. They give you a miniature cam strap. So if you wanted to put a bunch of gear in here and go do an overnight, you don't just have to rely on the bungee. You actually have a solid strap that you could strap your dry bags down, your luggage, whatever you wanted. And they actually do a couple of D-rings here stacked on each other, so you have multiple tie-down positions. Just really smart, functional use of a cockpit. And overall, I think that's kind of my most exciting, or my biggest takeaway with the Lite Tackle II is that they spent a lot of time refining the things that were, you know, maybe just a little too simple on the first one, refining them and making them functional without cluttering. It's still very clean, it's still very simple, but it's more functional than ever. As we work towards the back, you'll see that they've thought about adding motors or power poles to the back of this thing. They have this nice big platform. You could easily mount a torpedo if you wanted to on here, and then run those lines into here up to your foot pedals for steering. You could add a power pole if you wanted to. Or if you wanted to do, like, say you're fishing the river and you wanted to do a big anchor off the back, you could run an anchor off here as well. So now let's talk about hull design. The hull design actually stays exactly the same. I can't think of really anything they've changed besides adding this little cutout for a transducer. But the actual design is identical. It's got a real high volume bulbous bow. This allows the boat to ride high and dry. It cuts through waves and goes up and over as opposed to punching through them. So a nice dry ride. It also has a nice rocker profile. As we look at the chine of this boat, it starts real high, goes real low, and then rocks back up towards the stern. But you'll notice the actual keel of the boat has a mild amount of rocker. So this part is fairly flat, which will give it good tracking. But the rocker profile on the side is gonna make this boat feel a little bit less on the primary stability, but rock solid on the secondary stability. And it also allows you to paddle it like a true traditional kayak, where you can edge the boat and cause the boat to turn just by shifting your body weight. So a little bit more three-dimensional than a lot of the basic kayaks out there that are all based around primary stability. Should be really great. Let's give it a paddle and see how it does. So they're trying to not like fanboy out over this boat, because I feel like I always give Crescent such high praises, but I really do feel like they've struck a neat chord of balance, like rough water performance, stability, kind of just a good all-around kayak for a good value. So if you've seen me praising them, it's only because I feel like they're really doing a good job. And I know that when I've sold these boats to people in the past, when I had the shop, folks were genuinely happy and enthusiastic about these kayaks. As far as performance of the Lite Tackle II, it feels very similar to the first Lite Tackle, because the whole design really didn't change. So it has a little bit of primary and secondary stability. Like, that boat wants to rock and roll, which seems like a bad thing, but really that's what you want. If you're gonna take this thing in any sort of conditions, or wind or chop, you want a boat that rides with the water, that doesn't plow through the water. It doesn't feel, stationary and gets lofted around by waves. This thing's gonna rock and roll with waves. The other thing that allows a kayak to do is, if I wanna turn the boat, I can put the boat slightly on edge, push with my foot as I sweep, and use the edge of the boat to get it to come around. So what that does is it makes a 12.5-foot boat feel much, much smaller and more compact. And that's one of the things I've always loved about the Lite Tackle, is that it's a really good balance between speed, maneuverability, and performance. And one thing I'll say about the design of the Lite Tackle is it's got a real buoyant bow. The good thing of that is it rides high and dry in the water, and it rides up and over the waves. The downside is it does make it a little slower. It plows a little bit more water, and you do feel that. The other thing I wish it had the ability to add a rudder. I know it's got things that you could add on it, but I wish it was like a factory thing, like you could buy a Crescent rudder and just add it to the boat. Because I feel like that would open up a lot of maneuverability and control with this particular boat, with the rocker profile. I just think it would complement it really well. As far as the creature comforts go, it feels really, really stable. I can rock and roll. This is the low seat position. I'll go ahead and put it up in the high and show you guys that. I like the fact that it moves from its initial to its secondary real easy, but yeah, it's totally stable enough to stand up in and move around in. I also like the buoyant bow. As I stand up and move my way forward, it doesn't really like sink down in the water because you have all that buoyancy around the cockpit. Let's go ahead and raise that seat up to the high position. There we go. Put those foot pedals back a little. Wow, feels like you're way up here. But it's that same predictable feel. You do feel like your weight's a little bit higher up in the boat, but it still feels really stable. I think somebody 300 pounds could get in this boat and still feel really stable, still be able to take advantage of this high seat position. If you're a bigger guy and you have one of these, if you've used one, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It's always real helpful when somebody that actually owns a boat chimes in and shares their perspective. As far as paddling goes though, being up high, it's just a little harder to paddle, a little harder to reach the water, a little bit more leverage on the body. I definitely like the seat low for paddling. That position just gives you a little bit easier reach to the water, a little bit more comfortable stroke. I was just thinking this boat reminds me a lot of the Crescent Shoaly, but a little bit more trimmed up, a little bit higher performance version of that boat. It doesn't have all the fishing features, it's a little narrower, but I think if somebody was wanting to fish but still wanting a boat to go recreational kayaking with, that this would probably be a better option for most people. It does feel a little zippier, it feels like it tracks a little better, but I think I could still take it down some class 1, class 2 rapids with no problem at all. Just a real pleasurable boat to be in. Let's get some speed going and see how the bow wake does. Yeah, it's not bad. This is about how fast it wants to go. And I bet we're going about 3.5 miles an hour. Any faster than this and you're going to be working way hard, but at 3.5 it's got a nice easy stroke. It's not a ton of current, but I thought I would get it out here and play on the sack a little bit. Just kind of pull in and out. You can feel the whole design not wanting to grab. It's real bulbous, so it wants to kind of cruise on top of the water without getting shoved downstream. I'll try to demonstrate here without getting wet. It's just kind of a reminder that just because you're in a fishing kayak, it doesn't mean it has to be like dead in the water. It doesn't have to be all primary stability. You can still have a good paddling kayak and still go fishing at the same time. So I stick to my first review of the Crescent Lite Tackle. I'm a huge fan of the way it performs. I'm a huge fan of the value it has, and definitely a huge fan of the upgrades they made. I think it's gonna make your time on the water even better. There's not a ton of shops out there that carry Crescent, so you might have to look around a little bit to find them or find somebody to ship to your area. But I definitely think it's worth your time to get in one, try it out if you can. And if not, hopefully this review helps give you a little bit of a background information to make a good buying decision. So thank you guys so much for watching the review of the Lite Tackle II. If you have any more questions, leave those in the comments below. If you have a Crescent Lite Tackle II and you want to share your thoughts, do me a favor, leave us a comment. That's always super helpful to the community that's here to find information. All right, until next time, you guys, this is Dan wishing you happy paddling. We'll see you on the next one.